Hi, I'm Kris Oldland. I'm the Editor-in-Chief of Field Service News, and I'm here to bring you a sample from our most recent webinar. This time around, I was joined by Sandy McCaskie, who's the Sales Director at Xplore, and Bob Ashenbrenner, who's the President for Durable Mobility Technologies. And the webinar was looking at how to shop smarter when effectively mapping out your next mobility project. It's a great presentation that Bob and Sandy gave together across the session that really builds on an excellent playbook that Xplore have put together. At the end of the session, I put a few questions to Sandy and Bob, and that's what we're going to have a little listen to now, looking at how field service organisations can really get their heads around making sure that their processes when looking at mobility solutions are completely holistic and make sure they get the quickest return on investment. Let's have a little listen.
We touched on this, or you guys touched on this during the presentation. We're not buying a device per se, we're buying a solution. How much for those companies, let's say those companies that are, and there's still an awful lot of companies out there that have very little of zero mobility solution. They're still working on triplicate paper. They don't particularly have a field service management software system. How much should the decision in what hardware and what software to use and looking at it as an ecosystem, how much should we be considering it as that kind of solution system, going, well, I'm going to choose, the R12 and I'm going to put it on ServiceMax, say, and then kind of expect the two vendors to talk together, or is the decision for each, obviously they're both very, very important decisions, so should they be treated equally as, well, we need to decide what device we're going to go with for our hardware, and then we need to go with our software, or does the one come before the other even? Does software, should that be selected first, because then we know, as you guys were referring to, what screen size, for example, whether it's button-based. Any kind of suggestions, ideas, and advice for companies in that situation trying to tackle that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Sorry, Bob.
One at a time, Tom. Come on, let's make it fair.
From my perspective, companies tend to look at the software application way before they look at the hardware platform. And I think that's a mistake. I think they ought to engage software and hardware at the same time, and also get those two partners engaged together. So they're developing for the right platform, but it's normally the software they look at first. Now, if it's the first time round they're implementing an IT mobile solution, they tend to look to port their old paper systems into the new system, the new IT system. What that results in essence, is with whoever software they go for, there's a certain amount of rewriting, and it's a bespoke solution to themselves. Now, when that happens, all of a sudden, you've got costs down the road when it comes to updating the software, which is why working with a hardware supplier such as Xplore, we can mitigate that, because the first unit that rolls out, the unit that rolls out 12 months later or 18 months later is going to be the same. They don't have to think about having to get their bespoke software rewritten. Can't say that with a consumer or a commercial offering.
Sure. Bob, your thoughts?
In essence, I think both the software and hardware should be engaged as early as possible.
That's exactly right. You don't want to let the tail wag the dog. You don't want to pick a device that limits your software options. When you look at both together, you should be picking devices that are the easiest for you to deal with relative to software, because the software is your process. Your software really controls the order of work, and you don't want to pick a device that is a straitjacket. And the other piece of this that I think you mentioned earlier, Kris, and that Sandy's brought up again in this answer, is by getting a device that's been designed to operate for the next 3 to 5 years, you save yourself an awful lot of churn and change. Obviously, the operating system and the computer can handle the load, the software load, but Xplore has tablets that work in vehicle docks that haven't changed in 5, 7, and more years, and that's on purpose. If you were buying consumer devices, and you were buying over a period of 3 years, you would have to buy different devices for different times of when you deploy. You'd have to buy different protective cases, and they're not interchangeable every time a consumer device changes. So yeah, you definitely want to look at software and hardware together to make sure that neither choice is pinning you into a corner.
Okay, that brings us to the end of this brief snippet of this excellent webinar. If you'd like to access the full webinar, it's available to Field Service News subscribers. If you're not a subscriber, all you need to do is click the link below, and if you're a field service practitioner, so if you're a service director or a service manager, or if you're an IT director or a business leader for a field service organization or an organization that has a field service division, then just click the link, complete the brief box below, and we will send you a copy of the full webinar just as a way of saying welcome to the gang. And from there on in, you'll get emails that let you know about every single resource, so more webinars, white papers, research reports, and a whole bunch more. For now, my name is Kris Oldland. I'm the Editor-in-Chief of Field Service News. It's been my pleasure to bring you this brief sample of this excellent webinar. Cheers.